Right? Let's just be honest. We all know what I'm talking about. Second Corinthians 5:21. 2 Corinthians 5:21. For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. Become. That we may become the righteousness of God in him. For he made him, Jesus Christ, who knew no sin, to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. That's awesome. So the problem is not that we haven't been born again. The problem is not that we weren't saved when we gave our lives to him and had that strong conversion. That's not the problem. The problem is that we often lose the realization of his righteousness because we lose contact, close contact with him. And why do we lose it? Because we are in the swarms of this world. We are lost in the maze of our fleshly desires. And we just wander, and then we have these bursts of connection. And instantly, when you connect with him, you have bursts of faith. But God doesn't want these bursts. He wants to shine his light strong, consistent, and constant through the night. So what you have seen in the church over the last 2,000 years are bursts. Sometimes they last for years. Some revivals last for years, some only a week. The last revival that was talked about here in the U.S. was at that college, I think. Now, I never went there to test it, but from what I heard from people, it was a true revival. People gave their lives to Christ and were renewed. And it was stopped because I think there was some issue with room and housing, and it was just a little bit too unpleasant for the deacon of that college or whatever. Yeah, those type of things can stop a revival. I mean, people are getting healed and saved. Yeah, that's good, but in front of the cafeteria, the one guy stepped on his toe, and we can't have that, right? Because it was too crowded. Too many people came. Well, then make room for them. But then you have to have faith. How do you have faith? Close to Jesus. Whew. We must meet Jesus again and again to refresh that realization of our righteousness in him. It sets the tone for the day. It sets the tone for the week. It sets the tone. Because when we come into his presence and realize how righteous and pure he is, it affects us. It turns rocky ground into fruitful ground. It turns thorny ground into fruitful ground. And suddenly our day is completely different. Because the foundation was laid by him who lays the foundation, who is the foundation. His righteousness is the foundation. What is there without his righteousness? How can he save us without his righteousness? So by meeting him in the morning or in the middle of the day or at night, it's actually a really good time. Some of the most powerful times were at midnight for me. He turns whatever rocks you have, he turns it into soil, and from there on you can grow faith. You cannot grow faith among rocks and thistles and thorns. You recharge every time you experience his righteousness. That life-changing power in you is recharged. You rediscover your amazing liberty that you have in Jesus because of his righteousness. Not liberty to sin, but liberty to be truly free. Thank you, Lord. And this nation will be blessed if we rediscover that God gave us liberty to preach the gospel instead of having liberty to change our gender. This nation will be blessed again when we discover that God gave us liberty so that we can preach Jesus, so that we can have strong churches, so that we can build up strong believers instead of the liberty to go and gamble or do this or that. The liberty that we find in our finances. That's not a liberty compared to the liberty that Jesus gave this nation, that Jesus gives everyone who believes in him. And when we come to that place, then shall we live by faith. And you can make that decision. It's not me, it's not Dan, it's not Pastor Fred. It's you that comes to that decision and says, okay, Jesus, I want to get real with you. First thing I need to do is discover your righteousness again and again and again and again. Okay. It is impossible to live a life of faith without having experienced Jesus Christ. It's impossible to keep living a life of faith without continually experiencing Jesus. He's the life source to everything. Righteousness is in us. Righteousness in you and me is not just the testament of Calvary. Righteousness in you and me is a living testimony that must be lived day by day by day. I say it again, it's not just the testament of Calvary, what Jesus has done. Righteousness in us should become a living testimony that is renewed and lived every day. How do you find it? By finding Jesus. Righteousness must be actively working in us by being connected to him. Righteousness is finding that, and finding his righteousness means what I have done 10 years ago, I don't do no more. What I have done 5 years ago, I don't do no more. What I have done a year ago, a month ago, I don't do no more. Something has changed. How did it change? By spending time with him. By having multiple layers of revelation and realization that he is pure and righteous and beautiful, and that will rub off on you. And then you want to do that thing that you have done for years, and you feel like, I don't feel like doing it anymore. Hebrews 10:14 speaks also about this. It's beautiful. For by one offering he has perfected forever those who are being sanctified. It's wild. You think about it. For by one offering on that cross, the spotless lamb was offered for you and me. He has perfected forever those who are being sanctified. It's a process. It's a process. Sanctification means to meet the one who sanctifies. Only the righteous and spotless lamb can sanctify you. Imperfection, a person who is imperfect, a person that knows sin, that has spots and wrinkles, cannot sanctify you. I cannot sanctify you. Whatever, there must be, I'm sure there are denominations that do this type of stuff, that sanctify. I cannot do that. Jesus can sanctify you. Salvation is exactly this. We have been perfected by that offering on the cross, but it is also an ongoing process. Otherwise, the cross actually would lack power. It's so powerful that it goes into the present and keeps on working. It's awesome. But faith stalls, faith disappears, faith deflates in us when we lack those discoveries of his righteousness. That's when faith deflates. When we make it about an event of the past instead of today. Okay, now by the way, these lacks then of revelation, these lacks that we have of the revelation that he is righteous, the times that we meet him, the lag that is created by that weighs down our conscience. And a weighed down conscience will never raise up your faith. You have to have a clean conscience so that your faith would rise up like wings of eagles. Rise up, that faith grows. That measure of faith that you have been given multiplies as you spend time with him, as you learn about his righteousness. His purity rubs off on you. The measure you have been given multiplies. Okay, 2 Timothy 2:22. It says there, flee also youthful lusts, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. So the door to faith is righteousness. Run away from your fleshly desires and run to him, and you will find righteousness. Once you have righteousness, once it rubs off on you, once you are liberated in his righteousness, faith comes, love comes, peace comes. All these things will come. Now, here's the secret. Here's the secret about righteousness. Your soul, the soul of your soul, my soul, will never find rest. This is a very powerful truth. The soul will never find rest unless the soul finds righteousness. Now, I want you to think about that. Your soul will not find the rest that it craves until it finds righteousness. Nothing